So thanks everybody. Welcome to our first ever RiseOUT community event. We are thrilled to have Jeremy Lowenstein, CMO of Milani Cosmetics, here to answer all of our burning questions. And we are thrilled to see such a great turnout of people here to support our new community. Feel free to visit our website to find out what our upcoming event opportunities are. Our next one is in February, on February 3rd at 4 p.m. Mark your calendar. We will have Mark Brashear, who is the former chairman of Hugo Boss, being interviewed by Rustin Richburg, who is the chief people officer at Bark, which is a pet brand that recently went public. And the co-founders of RiseOUT are myself, David Knapp, Julio, and Anish, who are also on the call here. And we're thrilled to see you. So thank you all for coming. Jeremy, are you ready to go?
I'm ready, but I would love for you to just talk a little bit about why you started RiseOUT before we even get into me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. We started this group because when we were growing up, we just didn't see role models that we saw ourselves represented in. We didn't see any out gay men in the C-suite, and we wanted to create a community that's focused on connecting and creating the next generation of gay role model business leaders. And, you know, really it came from that personal need of what would we like to see in the world. And we realized that it was a great time to create that space. And so our vision is to hold these kind of opportunities to really bring people together, spotlight different luminaries like yourself who have had tremendous success in the business world, and just learn from each other, get to know other gay men and allies, and really find out what it takes to get to the top. Because we believe that growing up gay really creates a gritty resilience that makes LGBTQ leaders unstoppable. And we want to cultivate those leadership skills through authentic live experiences like this and develop transformational connections. So thanks for helping us empower the next generation by sharing your unique perspective.
No, I love that. It's a great mission and objective. So excited to work with you guys on it.
Thank you, Jeremy. So what leaders have inspired you, and what behaviors did they exhibit or career moves that they made that made them rise to the top and get to role model status for you?
Sure. You know, I think if I go back and just even think about my background. So for those of you who don't know what I do or where I've come from, I've spent 20 years in the beauty industry. I've spent most of my time in big beauty. I was at Estee Lauder companies for 5 years. I was at Coty for 11 years, so a true New Yorker. And then I went the D2C route and moved out to California. I've been in California now for 2.5 years, between San Diego and now LA. You know, I've had a lot of different role models for various reasons. You know, if I go back to my days at Aveda, one of my first bosses there, who I still talk to, he's a group president at L'Oreal. He just was ferocious. He was all about getting to the top, and he never took no for an answer. He would always say to us on the team, he's like, good enough never is. And sometimes that's a little bit bad. I don't know if I would frame that the same way I would with my team. It's a different personality and leadership style. But what I respected was that he had a vision and he just executed and really trusted his gut, and also went direct to the consumers, who at that point for us were our hairstylists. That's from a business side. I'd say the other role model that I have, and who I also still talk to, is from Coty. She was my first boss at Coty. She hired me. Her name is Terry Siegel. And when I joined Coty, I was an assistant marketing manager working on mass celebrity and lifestyle fragrances. And Terry, at that point, must have been in her 50s. She had 2 young children. She was working full time, but part of the time at home, and Coty gave her that opportunity, and part of the time in the office. And I actually got to know her family that way, and her and I have been very close ever since then. And what I respect about her and look at her as a role model is because she actually put personal and family first. And I find that for me, that was an example of you can be a VP, a C-suite, and still have a family. One doesn't have to come at the expense of the other, but they are all choices about when you put things into priority. So those are just two people who I look to, I look up to from a role model perspective.
That's great. So you talked about having a vision and executing it fearlessly, and then also, making time for your personal life and your family outside of work. Can you talk a little bit more about what's your personal definition of success? And do you feel like you've reached the top of the mountain now that you're a CMO?
I have definitely not reached the top of any mountain. I don't know what the top looks like. Um, I think success comes in it's personal. I think people look at what do they want to give back to the world and to the community at large and leave behind, that sort of notion of legacy. I think that evolves. I haven't figured out that completely. I think I've been successful in my career. I think I still have more to go in my personal life. I think I sacrificed a lot to get to where I am unknowingly, just because I was ambitious and still am ambitious. But I spent a good number of years on an airplane back and forth to different countries for work, and I think that can hinder your social life and your dating life. But I think as you go to the top, I think one of the biggest questions marketers ask themselves, and I think any sort of people in their own discipline start to ask themselves as they get to a certain level, is at what point do you want to move away from your functional expertise and move into general management? For me, the next title position is obviously as a CEO. And I've had some really interesting conversations with other mentors of mine who have been in similar positions. And once you leave the marketing suite and move into the executive suite, your areas of focus change. You don't get to work on the campaign developments with your team or the product development or the direct to consumer marketing plans. At that point, you are full like GM style, working on operations, HR, you are looking at everything. And I think there's some internal questioning you have to do. What do you enjoy? Because if you don't enjoy what you do, what's the point of doing it? So could I go apply for a CEO job? Sure. Am I ready to give up marketing? I don't think so yet. I love what I do. That's why I said I don't know where the top of the mountain is. And I think I'm still young enough that I have hopefully decades to go to figure that out. And I also think the top of the mountain could change. Maybe one day it's not actually working for a brand, it's actually going back to teaching. So who knows?
You mentioned a little bit about what you've given up in terms of you're on a lot of airplanes. Socially, that can be challenging. Is there anything else that you've had to give up to get to where you are today? And then you also mentioned that there's evolving priorities as you mature. Is there a trigger or milestone you have in mind where you think your priorities will shift and you'll choose to stop rising the corporate ladder?
Sure. I'd say when it first hit me around what are those milestones, because again, milestones are personal. I don't think I don't know if there was anything else I gave up for one. I think I lived my best life in New York City and traveled, saw a lot of the world through work. Also, I got to do some personal travel that way as well. But I think, this is going to sound super cliche, but when I moved to San Diego, about 4 or 6 months in, I woke up one morning and I had this like, holy shit moment. I'm like, wow, I think at that point I was 38, 37. I was like, wow, I'm 37 and single and living in San Diego. What have I done with my life? And I know that sounds stupid and silly, but I know what I've done with my life, but it starts to put things into perspective. And I think part of it is when you live in a city like New York City, you get very wrapped up in work culture. That is what drives that city. And it's amazing. I think when you leave and you go into a city that is definitely slower, you can't change the city. I thought I could. I can't change San Diego as one person. The city starts to change you. I don't think I'm that different, but I started to appreciate, oh, I don't need to literally unlock the building at 7:30 in the morning to be in the office. People here don't show up till 9 or 10. I still don't do that. But there's just a little bit of a priority shift. And I think that's what started to change me as from leaving New York. Does it mean I'm never moving back to the East Coast? Absolutely not. But I think it starts to put life into perspective when you go somewhere else and make that dramatic of a life change.
For sure. I was just in Miami and I noticed that at the restaurants where people in New York are very lean in, what bank do you work at? And in Miami, it was very much
That's
a different vibe.
they say that when you move to California, I was told, never ask anybody here, what do you do for work? You're supposed to ask them, how do you spend your time?
Yeah.
And it's just a different cultural dynamic that you have to get used to. I still spend 50, 60 hours a week working, and working, I think, for everybody no longer has boundaries. But I think certain cultures within the country in different cities have those boundaries, and you just have to learn to adapt a little bit.
Another personal question I wanted to ask you, what if you could give advice? I'm channeling RuPaul now. If you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
So I'll separate them between personal and professional. Professional, I think sometimes it's keep driving, but it's also okay to slow down. I'll give you the example of why I say that. When I was in university, I went to Boston University in business school for undergrad. And for those who are in marketing, know that sometimes it's hard to get your first job right out of college. Marketers aren't always the first one. It's not like finance where there are thousands of job openings right away and you're like the incoming class to JP Morgan. It can take a long time. And I got very lucky with my role at Lauder because it started off as an internship. I was the intern that never left. And I had the really unique fortune to work for them while finishing undergrad for 2 years. So I actually launched their men's line while I was a senior in college. And I gave up studying abroad because I was way too nervous about giving up a job opportunity because I didn't know what would happen after college. I wanted just to keep leaning in and have that chance to move to New York City. On the personal side, I think I didn't come out until I was in my mid-20s. I think the world is different today. I don't think it took time for me to be open and honest with myself about who I was, and everyone goes through their own exploration. But I think if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have come out and done it earlier. But that's hindsight's 2020. So I sort of had to explore my out life later in my mid to late 20s versus in my teen years. So I was growing in my career, figuring out who I was, and doing that all at the same time. So I'd say that.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you started out at Estee Lauder, which is a big company, well-known brand. For mid-career marketers, do you think it makes sense to kind of grow up in a large organization and loyally climb the corporate ladder? Or do you think it makes more sense to go to smaller organizations, wear a lot of hats, and hop around companies and industries?
Yeah, I think some of it has to do with personality. Where do you feel your best fit? If you want to be a specialist and be very focused and just go into the 18-month rotational programs that like a L'Oreal has, I think that works. I got my training at Lauder and I didn't rotate there. And I had a lot of success growing up at Lauder, and then within Coty, Coty, I was there 11 years. It's an anomaly for today. I think you get different types of training at both types. It is harder to move from big company to small indie brand. I'd say there are from what I've been told from recruiters and other executives, there are very few of us who have successfully made that jump from when I left Coty, we were 22,000 employees and I went to a 35-person company. And it taught me how to be much more agile, much faster, limited resources. But I do tell my team today, so my team here at Milani, we're about a total company size of about 70 or 80 people. I tell my team, you get to wear many hats here and forget titles. The exposure that you get to the leadership team here, who actually is a tenured leadership team, we get to help you develop and nurture your talents, and you're going to learn a lot of different things a lot faster, which actually in these days will make you more attractive to a larger company because they know you know how to be agile. I think big companies can be very regimented, but some personalities, type A personalities, that works. And that means you'll thrive there. I'd say the other piece to consider as you're going through your own personal growth, from what I've been told, those who work at Facebook, they do this well, is recognizing that individual contributors are just as important as team leaders. Not everybody is cut out to be a team leader or a manager. My job is 50% HR. I probably more. I don't do the work as much as I used to. I spend most of my time managing a team. And I think individual contributors, though, if you can identify that in yourself, you don't want to manage people, that's okay. And I think being in an organization that acknowledges that and helps you nurture that and still gives you the recognition, I think is important. But you also have to sort of recognize that in yourself. I don't want to manage people. I want to be like the killer contributor because I know I'm really good at what I do. I'd say that's another element to consider when you're going through your personal growth.
You know, one thing that strikes me during this conversation is you have a lot of confidence. And I think that can be a struggle for a lot of people, particularly if they are struggling with their identity outside of work, or they feel that they have to prove themselves. So can you talk a little bit about what has given you the confidence to be comfortable in your own skin today? And then sort of related to that is, what are those milestone moments or hindsight moments where you say, okay, I can take that learning and now I'm confident in that bit of information or in that decision?
Sure. What gives me the confidence? You know, I say this lovingly, like I am very close to my parents. I'm very lucky to have very, very supportive parents. And that's professionally, personally, have always been super encouraging for me and have been a support system, you know, good, bad, ugly. I think that's what's nice about family, whether it's your birth family, your chosen family, whatever that is, they are there. I think that helps build confidence. You know, I think for me, it's just about being who I am. You know, I tell my team, and anytime I start a new job, I'm like, listen, I'm just going to call it like it is. I have nothing to hide. We're here to win this together. And if I'm not fully here and present and transparent, then I'm not like doing you any good as a team. And like I said, I look at my role as being 50% HR and mentor. I prioritize the development and relationships with my team above brand every day of the week, because I would be ignorant to think that people are going to be loyal to me and stay working for me forever or stay with the brand forever. But what I do know is that people who do work for me will go on to new jobs, and the way they perform, not just in like their deliverables, but the way they behave is a reflection of my management. And that's more important to me, because at the end of the day, we're all people. In terms of my lows, I think everybody has lows. We all have failures. This concept of ascension into where I am today is weird. I actually never introduce myself with, in a professional setting with my title. I hate my title. I think it's irrelevant. I jokingly said to my team, you can call me the executive assistant. I do not care. Um, I think we've all, like I said, had failures. We've had setbacks. I've had my product launches that have failed. We have relationships that fail. I have, walked away from jobs that, it just wasn't a good match when I found something else. And I think it's about having those open and honest conversations, because if, like I said earlier, if you can't get up every day and be excited about where you're going to spend the next 8 to 10 hours, why are you doing it? And it can't be for the paycheck. Money does not buy happiness. I know that everyone knows the expression. It is true. And if you can't own up to that, then I think people are in the wrong jobs.
And you mentioned it's important to you to be authentic when you show up at work. Can you talk a little bit about, your gay identity at work, and if that has helped or hindered you? And if it hasn't been a factor, have you seen it be a factor for any other
Sure.
gay people in your organization?
Yeah. Like I said, I came out in my mid-20s. It is interesting because I don't walk around with the pride flag behind me. Being gay is a part of who I am. It does not define who I am. There are multiple things that define who I am. I think we all are like that. Has it helped me in my career? If it has, no one has ever said that to me. I think performance is performance. That's what it is at the end of the day. I think, I had a boss, Cody, one of my favorite bosses. She's half Italian, half English. And for the last 5 years I worked there, my bosses were always Europe based. And I was very close with her. Her name is Joanna. And I will never forget, she was in New York one time, and I was in my office, and she was in one of my direct reports' offices next door. And somehow they got onto the conversation of my personal life, which is fine. I'm open about it. And she found out that I was gay, and she ran into my office and shut my door. And she goes, "You're gay?" And I was like, I didn't know I needed to tell people that. And it's just like I said, it's a part of who I am. It doesn't need to define me. I think, has it helped me in other ways? No. Like I said, I'm a gay man in the cosmetics industry. Shockingly, most of the men who work in cosmetics are straight. Maybe in the marketing side, most are gay, but finance, ops, R&D, all straight. So I will just dispel that myth right now. So I don't think it helps. I don't think it hurts. I think what you're doing here is a huge opportunity around building a cohort, a network of people to lean into, ask questions, lean on one another to help through certain situations, ask for advice. I always look at this as an opportunity. I think there've always, when I joined the cosmetics world, there's an organization called CEW, which is Cosmetic Executive Women. Men were not allowed in the organization until at one point, one of the lauders said, you got to let men in, but they won't change their name. And this is a little bit similar, is there's an opportunity to build a network, either within a function, an industry, whatever it is, to talk to each other. We have shared experiences on some level. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Does it shape, though, what companies you'll work at or assignments you'll take? As an example,
yes,
a lot of countries don't acknowledge gay marriage, or it's not legal. So it'd be difficult, I think, to have an assignment.
Yes, I would say yes, especially as I've gotten older. Again, I think 20 years ago, I think conversations were very different. I think today, the way I would perceive a company is, everyone wants to work for a company that values them as much as you value each other. It's when you interview, it's a two-way interview. You want to make sure that you're going somewhere that values who you are as a person. You look at paternity leave, the list can continue to go on. So I think that is important for me from a value set perspective.
And you mentioned, performance is performance. Can you talk a little bit about why you think so few CMOs ascend to CEO, and why has it traditionally been the CFO that gets that seat?
Again, I think sometimes it's personal. I think marketers are by definition a little bit more creative. Marketers are really split left brain, right brain. I consider myself just as strategic and analytical and financial as I am a creative person. I actually never thought I was creative. My parents always joke that we always knew you were creative. You just like to tell yourself that you were more of the strategic one. I'm like, no, I like both. And I think it's hard to give that up sometimes. You want to you want to work on the creative. It's the fun stuff. So I think marketers, CMOs will jump around to different, brands, industries. I think what's been nice for me to see coming from the beauty world is historically beauty marketers were very much siloed into the beauty world, because the running joke was, well, beauty marketers aren't real marketers, because we didn't come from the P&Gs and Unilevers and J&Js of the world that have a very different quantitative approach to marketing. Whereas beauty marketers are like, well, people are multidimensional, and we are ultimately telling stories. So much of beauty is impulse driven. And if you can't story tell, what are you doing there? And now what's happened over the past, I'd say 5 to 7 years, is there has been this demand for beauty marketers in non-beauty spaces. And, an example of one, I can name a lot of them, but one woman who has made that move very successfully is a woman named Marissa Thalberg. She is, she's now at Lowe's, like the competitor to Home Depot, as their CMO, or she's CMO and chief brand officer, which I love. But this was her second stint out of beauty. I know her from water, and before this, she was at Taco Bell. And I think it's about telling real human stories, and that's why sometimes marketers just want to stay where they are. It's doing that work as opposed to being where a CFO is much more black and white, the generalist. They usually will let their CMOs run. And my example here at Melania, my boss, who I used to work with at Coty, which is what brought me here, she is a tenured sales executive, J&J trained, was at Coty with me in sales roles, a GM role, CEO of Perricone, CEO of Soma and Chico's in Florida. And, when she asked me to come join her, she's like, you do marketing. I'm here to be the generalist. And she goes, I know sales. She goes, I know the product, and I hope so, because she is definitely a beauty enthusiast, but marketing she leaves to the marketing team.
And you said marketers like to stay within the marketing space, but they do. I've seen there's a lot of turnover in the CMO role. Even the woman you just mentioned was at Taco Bell and Lowe's and in beauty. So can you talk a little bit about why you think there is so much turnover in the CMO job?
Yeah, I think there's a misconception. I think a lot of people think that CMOs or marketers have a silver bullet that are going to fix everyone's problems. And I'm very clear with leadership that I join and teams that marketers don't own brand. Brand is owned by everybody. We are the arbiters and help bring it to life, but it is a collective experience and effort to sort of bring the talk to life. I think also the marketing world has changed at such a rapid pace. Like, I don't think anything else has changed at this speed. Finance hasn't changed. Operations hasn't changed other than sort of the robotics and automation piece, but the way in which you talk to consumers and go to market from a digital ecosystem and now going back to traditional of like out of home is just, it's almost mind-numbing how fast it's changing. And I think there's an expectation that marketers are going to come in and flip the switch and everything happens. And it doesn't always work like that. We can't solve it all. And also it takes time. Consumers, we're all consumers. We are all complex human beings. It takes time to change brand perception, consumer behavior, and not all startups will make it. So, the legacy brands take really a long time to make those noticeable changes in identity and consumer perception and behavior around the brand. I remember sitting on a call one time, a networking call, and it was a mix of legacy and D2C and native D2C marketers. And the native D2C guys were like shitting all over legacy brands, saying they're just old, they're behemoth. I'm like, guys, legacy doesn't mean they're old and like stingy. They are actually legacy because they control market share and they have staying power. they have stood the test of time. They are all actively changing, but it just takes time. If they're in 90 countries, that's easily 2 years worth of work to get that done. So that's what I'd say. I think that there's going to be continued turnover in CMO roles, but I think we all learn from each other. We're just trying to move as fast as we can.
And you mentioned the, collective owns the brand. Shifting gears into the personal, I'm curious when you think about community, how do you give back to the community? Where do you donate your time and your money?
Yeah. I donate my time in a lot of different ways. So like I said, I'm multidimensional like everybody. So I consider myself, I'm a gay Jew. So I spend some of my time on sort of Jewish organizations, on gay Jewish organizations, on gay specific organizations. For me, I tell organizations when I get involved, I don't want to be a checkbook. I hate that. Can I donate money? Yes, I think that people can do that. I want to give my time, my brain, because that's where I want to add value and feel like I'm making a true difference. I'll just use our example. David and I met in spandex. We are both cyclists, and both of us have done the Boston to New York Cycle for the Cause AIDS ride, the Northeast AIDS ride, benefiting the New York LGBT Center. That is one way I want to spend my time. I've done it 5 times. I absolutely loved it. And now that I'm out in LA, I am now signed up and going to start, God help me, training that will get me to do AIDS Life Cycle ride from San Francisco to LA of 545 miles. But that's a way of giving back. Volunteering, I do volunteer work. I'm very involved, better for worse, of however one looks at it here, pro-Israel politics and U.S.-Israel relationship. Again, all different parts of me. And I'd say the other way I give back to the beauty community was something I did in New York. I was an adjunct professor for 4 years at FIT. So if you don't know FIT, it's the Fashion Institute of Technology. It's a state school in New York that caters towards more of the creative business industries, specifically fashion and beauty and industrial design. And I wanted to get involved with them. And I actually went in to go be a mentor. And the chairwoman of the department goes, "Why don't you just come in and teach?" And I said, "I never taught in my life." She goes, "Well, you kind of do it every day. You're a people manager." So I actually developed a course for juniors and seniors called The Business of Beauty. That was the headline. The sub-headline was The Fundamental Principles of Marketing Taught Through the Lens of a Beauty Marketer. And I taught that for 4 years. And to me, it was important to give back to the next generation of marketers. And I brought in guest speakers because I think those are very impressionable years of what do you want to do? Everyone says, "I want to be in the beauty industry." I'm like, do you even know what that means? They think that most people think I sit around here and literally and play with mascara all day.
Yeah.
Yes, that is part of my job, but I do not sit here and do this all day. Like I said, it's a little bit strategy, a lot finance, and creative. And I brought in colleagues of mine to guest speak as a way of giving back and to inspire them and give them direction and help them navigate the world of beauty. So that's another way of giving back for me.
You mentioned giving advice. What is the best advice you've gotten? And specifically, what did your parents teach you? What life skills did you learn from them?
It's a lot. I'll start with my parents. My parents have really just always taught me to be a good person. I think if you treat someone like you want to be treated, I think that goes much further than anything else you can do in life. And just be supportive. Like I said, they're so supportive. I don't know if there's so many life lessons they've probably given me at this point. I know lots of different pieces, and I think the best piece of advice is that I give other people is, like I said earlier, is if you don't enjoy what you're doing, stop doing it. Do something else, because our lives are long, and if you don't enjoy your career, you got to find something that you're passionate about and put your time, your effort, and your heart into it. Otherwise, I don't see the value. And then the other piece that I actually always tell very young people who are in college who want to go out and make their millions. And just, I said, my best advice to them is go take internships. It's okay to not get paid for a couple, first 2 years, and learn the ropes, build your network, build relationships, because those will go a lot further. I still talk to my teams. Like I had interns that I hired who are now vice presidents at other companies, and I still talk to them. World's small. So that's my advice.
So, you mentioned a couple of times you have such supportive parents, but not everyone is as fortunate. And I do think there are some people that are uncomfortable being out in the workplace.
Yep.
How important do you think, or how much do you think they should look for out executives to make them comfortable versus gaining that confidence in other ways?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I said your family could be your birth family or your chosen family, wherever that support network comes from. Like I said, I'm very lucky to have both. But I think everybody has the opportunity to find that in different places. I think what you're creating here is an opportunity for people to reach out to others, build that community, build friendships, mentorships, whatever you want to call it. They help. They're sounding boards. They're individuals that you can count on. So I think that will always help build people's confidence. And no one can do everything alone. It's just not possible.
So how much of your success would you attribute to your own effort and work, and versus how much would you attribute to luck, opportunity, timing?
I think it's a mix. I think everyone says, like, whatever you put into life is what you're going to get out of it. I think that's true. I've worked hard for where I am. Sometimes when maybe this is just me, sometimes when I'm in it, I can't actually see what I'm doing. Meaning I don't really always see the impact I'm having. Like, yes, I can see the financials and I see all of that. But sometimes you don't realize what kind of impact you're having either on people or brand. And when you get promoted because somebody else recognizes that in you and what you've delivered. And I think that also comes with humility. If you're not humble, and I actually think that becomes your biggest barrier to growth.
Then you can't learn.
Yes. It's more than that. I think you can end up with a very negative perception around you of that you just think that person they think they're all that and they want to do it on their own. And to me, that's actually a big turnoff. I want people who are humble, who can take a step back, who don't need to be in the spotlight. That's why I said I hate my title. It's there. Have I earned it? Sure. Can you call me the executive assistant or the year-long intern? Sure, I'm still going to do what I'm doing.
So you don't think that people answer because of your title when you send an email?
I don't know. I hope sure. I think is there corporate structure for a reason? Yes, there's weight that comes with a title, 100%. But you have to know when to use it.
Right.
Being the heavy all the time gets you nowhere. Be the heavy when it matters most. And to me, when it matters most is actually in support of my team. If they can't get things done and they need help, that's what I'm there for. But I don't walk around saying, hey, I'm the CMO, so you need to get this shit done. Like, it's just, right. To me, I'm there to.
You only have power over the team until they stop caring.
Exactly. And also, telling whether it's agency partners, suppliers, helping them, drive. I want to help drive the conversation and drive results in the end, because ultimately I'm accountable for that. And I think that's where the heavy or the weight comes in with title.
So Julio, how are we doing on the chat? Do we have any questions that I know I've been weaving them in throughout, but is there anything else?
You're making the Q&A portion a little bit more difficult on me. I appreciate that. We do have a few questions that we can add on to this.
Go for it.
Into those. All right. So I know that some of them were answered. And first, actually, Jeremy, let me say thank you for joining us for our first event. This has been really wonderful, getting a lot of great feedback in the chat. David answered a lot of the questions from Anish, Evan, Niles, John, KC. But if you feel like that you would like to hear a little bit more on your questions, definitely put it in the chat. Some of the ones that I don't think were really answered or that maybe we can double click into a little bit more. I want to start with Joseph, which I think it's a really interesting thing for a lot of the more senior folks in the room here. I think many of us want that CEO job, and there's a specific path that seems to be followed for a lot of CEOs. So how challenging is the move from CMO to CEO? Most CFOs are considered for the top job. Marketers have typically been considered for the creatives, not the analytics. You've said, I think that, how you straddle both strategy, analytics, and that marketing side. Do you see that perception changing is the question from Joseph.
Can CMOs become CEOs essentially? Yeah, there's no reason they can't be. I'm just as accountable for delivering numbers as, the salesperson. I think, especially as D2C has grown, so the direct to consumer world, I have oversight over D2C. So I actually have sales numbers that I'm trying to achieve. Whereas in the traditional sort of CPG or consumer product, there's a sale, my counterpart is senior vice president of sales. She handles Ulta, Target, Walmart, CVS. I'm her partner in it because I go in, but her and her team are setting financial KPIs, but her and I have to align on those because I have to do the marketing support. But on the D2C side, I'm dealing with growth, so acquisition and retention. So there are numbers behind there as well. So I think there are the proof points around revenue driving that marketers are gaining skills around more and more today. So I don't see the barrier to a CEO position. I think, like I said, it's a little bit of a personal choice of, do you have the ambition to do it?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you mentioned earlier something along the lines of, we are stewards of the business, not necessarily stewards of just the brand or the one thing that we are overseeing at that point in time. Yep. And so there's really no reason for us not to be able to weave into different roles. Another question related to changing perceptions. You brought many insights around rising to the top as a marketer, putting on an industry agnostic hat. How do you think industries where being openly gay is less commonplace? How could those industries and their leaders help make it easier for people to live authentic lives?
It's a very good question, and that is a very hard question to answer. Again, I think it's about the leadership of that company has to do some soul searching. And I think part of it is also having the people who work there kind of come forward and ask for it. If the leaders of the organization are true leaders, they'll listen to their teams. They're there to help further a more enjoyable workplace environment. And if that's not happening, they'll end up losing people. I think people are afraid of churn, and they want to keep employees satisfied. And I think more and more companies are just listening, is the hope. Not everyone's going to change. It's a tall order, but I think being open and honest and asking, what will make you happy in the role, hopefully that leadership team will start to listen and be more open to that.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned how you don't like your title a number of times. I think there's something to be said around, just because somebody has a leadership title doesn't mean that you yourself can't be a leader of that organization.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah, perfect. Two more questions, just to give you a heads up here. Now, on the topic of leadership and identity, can you talk about any key challenges or opportunities or lessons that you've learned leading teams once they knew that you are different on that simple fact of being gay?
Never comes up. I'm going to be totally honest. That doesn't change. Like I said, it doesn't change who I am. It hasn't made it more challenging. It hasn't, to my knowledge, opened doors. My team knows who I am. Like I said, I think in the world of social media, all of those boundaries of personal and professional have sometimes gone. For better or worse, my team starts to add me on Instagram as soon as I join, which I found very strange the first time that started to happen. I was like, you know what? There's nothing on here. Go for it. It's basically me in a lot of biking gear.
I was gonna say, in a lot of spandex.
A lot of spandex and a lot of pictures of Tel Aviv. So, go for it. There's nothing there that's that exciting. So yeah, I don't think it's hindered or made, maybe my team sees me different that way. They've never said anything to me.
John has a follow-up on that one that was just posted in the chat. What do you see as the role of an ERG, an employee resource group, in creating change within organizations? How else would you enact organizational change if you aren't the quote unquote leader?
So it's interesting. So the brand I was at before this, I was at a company, a non-beauty brand. My first non-beauty experience was a brand called MeUndies. They're a 10-year-old full D2C underwear, loungewear, and sleepwear brand, known for diversity, inclusivity, body positivity. It's an amazing brand based here in LA. And we had about 5 ERGs. ERGs are usually executive sponsored, but employee led. And they are meant to be resource groups, as they're called, to help facilitate conversation, give education and feedback to leadership. And we used to listen to our ERG leaders all the time because they are sometimes at the pulse of the company. Like you said, Leo, it's not, leaders come from everywhere in the organization. Just because you'll hold a different title doesn't mean you can't have a voice. And ERGs are a little bit of that gateway to make sure that you're being heard. I think sometimes people who are more junior feel that they don't have that voice. That's their opportunity. If the ERGs are being managed appropriately within the company, there should be a feedback loop that goes up to management where they're looking for change. ERGs don't necessarily always, they don't always see something that's happening behind the scenes or impact to business. So not everything that gets recommended gets implemented because it may have HR impact or whatever that is. But if it's being managed, like I said, and appropriately, then there should be that forum for sort of hearing and listening to feedback.
It's wonderful. I love how you phrase that. All right, I did lie to you. I'm going to ask 2 more questions, and then I promise it'll be over. The second to last one is, have you had a low or lull in your career? And if so, what form did it take, and how did you get out of it?
Sure. So I was at Coty for 11 years, and Coty went through 5 different CEOs while I was there. We were privately held when I started. We were probably about 3,000 to 4,000 employees, global, still small in scale. Went through multiple acquisitions, us acquiring. We went public. We bought P&G's beauty division. We had an entire leadership team from Reckitt Benckiser come in. It felt like I had gone through a war. It was a tremendous learning experience. We went from like a $2 billion company to a 10 billion by the time I left. Like I said, like 3,000 or 4,000 people to 22,000 people. After 11 years, I actually negotiated my way out. I was burnt out. I was tired. I was running Sally Hansen. Loved every single moment of it. But it was time to separate. I couldn't do it anymore. There were just cultural things that were not a fit for me anymore. And that was hard. Like leaving my team. I had a 12-month non-compete I had to negotiate down. And I took time, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next because beauty brands were holding employees to non-competes. So I'd say, was it a low? No, it was a lull. It was trying to figure out what did I want. I did a lot of consulting for 4 or 5 months while I was figuring out and interviewing. So I walked away from Coty without a job. I had no choice because no one's going to sit there and wait for a VP or CMO for a year. But I took the time, but I have a hard time just sitting down and doing nothing. So I was interviewing, and that's essentially what got me to San Diego. That was the rip off the New York Band-Aid, and I'm just going to try it and see what happens. So, and I think lulls are okay.
Yeah, I think, for a lot of the people that we've targeted, as you can see, this is an intimate event. So we target a lot of people who we know or are in our networks that we consider to be overachievers. And I think that question probably stems from the fact that for an overachiever, type A personality, or people who have been driven their entire lives, those lulls can feel a lot more impactful or a
Yep.
lot worse than it would for somebody who's not as career driven as some of us may be.
Yep.
But I do like your takeaway there that we learn about ourselves in those lulls if we focus on the positives. So my last question to you, which came from Emily, kind of takes it through that route around what we learn about ourselves throughout our careers, and takes it away from the identity piece. Was your passion to work within the cosmetics industry found through your internships or working within the industry, or did you notice that passion prior to your first work experience?
No, people definitely heard me talk. I had no interest in being in the beauty industry. It wasn't even on my radar. I was a marketing major at BU. I thought I was going to go work in entertainment or sports marketing. I thought I was going to go work for HBO and like work on Sex and the City. That clearly did not happen. I had so my story of getting into beauty was, I have a cousin who had worked at the Lauder companies. She retired after 48 years of being there. She was like, you should come work at Lauder as an intern. I actually like jokingly said, why? What would I do at a beauty company? And she was, just do it. It's fine. I had a choice between moving to New York and working for Showtime or working for Lauder. Showtime basically said to me, you'll be an intern, but you're going to be running and getting coffee for everybody. I was like, and Lauder was like, we're going to put you on a brand. You get a project and you're there. I'm like, okay, let's do that. So I went to New York, lived at NYU for the summer. They put me at Aveda. I had no idea what Aveda was. I was a very typical 19-year-old college student who I wasn't shopping Aveda. I like just fell in love with the brand, fell in love with marketing, the team. Like I said, the summer ended and like, hey, you're in the middle of a project. Do you want to just stay on? And I'm like, well, I have 2 more years of college left. What do you want me to do? And I live in Boston. And they're like, well, we'll just make you a freelancer. So that's what kept me on. And I got inspired and was fortunate enough to launch Aveda Men that still exists in the marketplace today. I was definitely that annoying kid in the marketing class while my professor was trying to teach Basie's model forecasting. I was like, that actually never happens. So let me tell you how forecasting is really done. And she was like, please stop talking. And I'm still friends with her. I actually have guest lectured in her class multiple times, but that's what got me into beauty. And I fought trying to stay in it. I wanted to get out, but like I said, it was hard to get out as a beauty marketer, and had the opportunity to go work at MeUndies, and I jumped at it. But here I am back in beauty. It just sucked me right back in.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. David, I'll hand it over to you, but the last thing I'll say, which I'm posting in the chat now, if you could all visit our website at riseout.co, join us at our next event, which David mentioned at the beginning of the session. We'll be interviewing Mark Bashir. But this has been great. David, I'll let you wrap it up.
I will also leave you with one thing. I just stuck it in the chat. I am always more than happy to talk to people. I think David knows that.